Welcome to the Social Chameleon Show, where it's all grown up, you learn, grow, and transform on your path to becoming legendary. Today's guest is Rachel Burr, an executive coach, leadership consultant, and people expert with over 2 decades of experience helping leaders and teams thrive. She blends sharp insight, real-world action, and just the right dose of humor to tackle one of the hardest parts of leadership, the people. Rachel has a unique ability to help high-performing leaders tap into their authentic strengths, improve team dynamics, and lead with clarity and confidence. With a master's degree in clinical psychology and organizational development, she brings a deep understanding of what makes people and teams tick. Whether she's coaching executives one-on-one or guiding leadership teams through tough transitions, Rachel is all about helping others unleash their potential and build workplaces where people can truly grow. Let's dive into a powerful conversation with Rachel Burr. Rachel, welcome to the Social Chameleon Show. I'm excited to talk with you. Leadership, psychology, and everything you kind of got.
Thanks, Tyson.
So I noticed when I was doing research for the episode, you went to school for psychology. How did that morph into leadership development?
So I was really convinced that I wanted to be a psychologist. I was on the road in a PhD program about halfway through, focusing on a lot of really intense kinds of areas. Folks who were struggling with a lot of really severe mental illness. And I'm not saying this to make light of, those of us are going to therapy for depression, anxiety, some of those things, which can be very severe. These were even more on the severity, that kind of the spectrum. And I have huge amounts of respect for my colleagues who still do this work, and for the people who I was working mostly with folks to help them getting back to functioning. And the reality was, for a lot of these folks, it's going to be a constant battle. What I realized I wanted to do was help people find the best of who they are and to step into that. And so for me, we're all psychological beings. It's not just about therapy or whatever. How we work inside has to do with psychology. So I shifted into the idea of coaching and really helping people tap into the core of who they are, strengths, weaknesses, talent, skills, all of those things, and understand their mindset and who they are and the way they see the world impacts their ability to step into their full self. So I feel like I bring all of what I learned to what I do now, and it's just taking it from kind of the foundation of that functional and really helping people grow exponentially.
So, being in a PhD program, you're probably upwards of $100,000 in debt. What's the self-talk like? What's the process like of saying, the safe option is like, let me just finish this off. I can always fall back on my doctorate. I got all this debt. How do I pay this back? All these things. What was that like? How did you get through that?
Well, to be fair, when I had this realization, I left my PhD about halfway through, which actually, going back to the book, is kind of where I start my own developmental journey. And that first big quit some of us have. Now, for me, in terms of the money part, I was really fortunate because if you're in a PhD program and you're a research assistant or TA or something, often they give you, they don't pay for your living expenses. They may give you a small stipend, but they don't charge you for the actual classes. So as opposed to like an MBA or some of those other professional degrees. So, and I would still say coming out, I would say where my mindset was more of a challenge was, what do I do now? Because you were saying falling back on a PhD. It's really funny. There's this old joke, and I don't know if it's true, but people come into kind of MBAs like being, kind of wanting to change the world and coming out feeling like they're absolutely ready to take on the world. People come into a PhD thinking they're ready to help the world, and they come out feeling dumber than when they came in. Because there is this mindset. And I think part of it is, there's all that you can know, all that you can do. But it's very easy to feel like I have this very specific degree now, and it's even more specific because I've gone so far down this path that this is all I can do. And that's what I convinced myself of, that all I can do is to be a psychologist. And to all of my friends and colleagues out there, that is not a diss on a psychology. It's more of, I had told myself that if I don't do this, I will fail. So that was more the mindset that I had to struggle with versus kind of the monetary piece, or how do I shift over into, using my PhD for something else.
How did you get through that? How did you convince yourself, trick yourself? What was it that got you through that? Saying, I'm not going to be a failure. I'm not this one thing. I'm Rachel. I'm not PhD candidate in this very hyper specific, world and entity and discipline or problem you're solving and whatever, how those PhD things work.
Absolutely. It was a process. I would love to say that, I woke up, I was enlightened, trumpets heralded a new era. That is not what happened. So one of the things I say in my book is that change happens when fear of the unknown is finally dwarfed by a looming dread of the same.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Put that on a t-shirt.
Yes. I really had to get to a place where I was miserable and I couldn't fight it anymore. And that is when, I talk in the book about these clicks. When you think about a combination lock, sometimes people focus on the aha moment or the lock springing open. We ignore or don't appreciate all the little clicks that brought us there. It's kind of, if you hit the wrong numbers, your lock doesn't open. And looking back, I can see where these tiny little shifts started to happen, these steps I took, these risks I took, and how I moved up. And then all of a sudden, something kind of broke open and I realized what I was doing to myself. I realized how miserable I was making myself, and that this continuing down this path, as safe as it felt, because we have this comfort in discomfort, as long as it's a discomfort we know.
Right.
We play small because we think we're safe. And for those folks who aren't watching the video, safe is in air quotes because that doesn't exist anyway.
Right.
So I had to make this leap out of the program. I had no idea where I was going. I happened to be engaged at the time. And so I at least had something I knew. I had no idea. I was giving up a future, a career, everything, that I thought was safe. And it wasn't like leaving school, which people would think of. It was like cutting off my right arm. Mm-hmm. I had defined myself by this, and I jumped, and that's when the real work started. I had to process. I had to take risks. I had to do new things. I had to challenge myself that I wasn't really pushing myself far enough. And I've had the good fortune along many places in my career where some things just broke. Like they broke hard enough, and it wasn't me breaking them always. They broke hard enough where I had to do something different. And sometimes it's like the universe just bashed you over the head and you waited too long. You might have been getting little clues like you should change, you should do this. And then finally the universe just gives up and it's like bash you over the head. It's like, no, this is time. You have to do something different. So it was a lot of growth. It was a lot of head bashing. It was a lot of realizing that when I would take those steps, I was more capable than I thought I was. There were other things I could do, and starting to, the world likes to put us in boxes, because boxes are easy. We can, you belong in this box. Now I can walk away and I know exactly what that looks like. And I feel safe and I know how everything works. And we do it to ourselves, which is even worse, right? I am this, I am that. And starting to challenge that is this really kind of gooey discomfort. And that's where the transformation happens.
Was there, I don't know maybe how to phrase this, but maybe like a technique or a ritual or self-talk, a habit or something like that? When that fear is there and you're scared and it's like that unknown, our brains just absolutely hate that unknown, right? We don't like that uncertainty, that thing that's scary versus staying in a safe zone. How did you use that to get through it? Maybe you have techniques you teach other people. What do we do to get that fear and push through it, knowing I don't know what's on the other side necessarily, but I have the fortitude, I have the ability and kind of get through that. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a multi-pronged approach, or, kind of like a multi-attack, kind of it's like a military analogy. Sure. We're coming at it from
the flanks and the six. And
absolutely. Yeah.
Right, okay.
We got Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all coming in to help us. So one thing in the back of the book, I do put exercises in there. By the way, the book is Butterfly Goo, the Down and Dirty Truth of Transformation. Really looking at what it is to personally transform.
And I'll link that for you guys in the show notes, so don't worry about it.
So the exercise is in the back. And again, you just get to read the book. You get to do whatever you want with it, but they're there. In fact, they're even on the website, which we can talk about. You can download them now for free. I think there are certain kind of structural things you can do. And that, for me anyway, my experience was, we're flooded with emotion when we're scared, and it really short circuits our cognitive processing. It's just, which makes sense early on in, humans are hunting and gathering and something jumps out of the bush. We have to be prepared to react. The problem is our world has changed, our brain hasn't. So doing something that can bring our brains back into at least some semblance of, cognitive processing, draining that emotion away. It's not going to go away. And I want to be clear about that, because if people still feel anxious, they'll think, oh, I'm doing something wrong, or I can't do this. No. So you're trying just to kind of find that foundation again. A couple of things. One, to your point, it's naming. These sound so simple, but they really do work. What am I feeling? Naming what I'm feeling. So starting with that. And if I sit in it, first of all, I did this just the other day. I was anxious about something. I was worried, and I just sat down with a pencil and paper. And because for me, physically getting using that, it just helps me as opposed to typing. But if you like to type, do that. And it's like just being able to get out what's going on, getting it out of my head, and seeing it on paper, and it processes, and I get to see it physically, because sometimes when things are in black and white, they look really different than when you're just allowing them to bounce in your head. And you're bringing things into the light, because I talk a lot about, people use the term gremlin, they use the term inner critic. It's that little voice in our head that we have a dialogue, and I mean dialogue, because it's not a monologue with ourselves. We are talking to this entity. It loves it when we just keep stuff inside, because either shame or fear of addressing it, because that's where the stuff festers. It festers in the dark, and there's that sense of control that it'll just keep us small. So getting out, really sitting in discomfort, being able to process it. Now, to be fair, we all have escapism sometimes, spend too much time on YouTube. Got it. You get that every once in a while. But being able to sit actively in what's challenging for you or what you're scared of, it starts to dissipate when you start to work on it. You start to, think through it, challenge what those critics are talking to you about. It doesn't mean you're just pushing them away, because I think sometimes people will say, oh, well, that's not true. Well, you haven't really convinced yourself. You've just pushed it to the side. Right. It's like, okay, what is it I'm worried about? How much of that is true? What has me be concerned about that? What might be true instead? We talk about making a decision or not making a decision. Well, that's not how this works. Making a decision to take action is one thing. Making a decision not to take action and staying the same, that's still a decision. So you got to have accountability for it, because otherwise you're like, oh, I'm just, I'll wait. I'll make the decision tomorrow. No, you've just made a decision.
Yeah, that is your decision.
That is your decision.
No decision is a decision. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a lot of that processing, and there are different exercises. Like I said in the book, there's different exercises for people. Find what works for you. Some people, the journaling really helps. Some people, it's, talking to someone, therapist, friend, your dog, whatever. Right. So you find what works for you.
GPT, AIs, and stuff
absolutely.
Are really good at these things now. Yes.
Yeah, I had a client that I was working with, and in between our sessions, I do executive coaching, and he asked, Chat GPT's like, so this is where I am with my career, and asking these questions. Basically, it came out, well, maybe you're in the wrong job, and I'm thinking, do you really need me, or did I just lose my job? Because I'm not so sure that wasn't a bad question. So yes, there's so many ways, and it's not, if someone tells you have to do X, Y, and Z, challenge that. Challenge what works for you, because when people say you should do this, one of the things is a lot of times that's built on their fear, that's built on their experience, that's built on their journey, not yours.
Right. And a lot of times I notice that also doesn't even come from them. It comes from somebody that taught them that as a child, a well-meaning parent or a teacher or something along those lines.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people think that by giving you, definitive things to work on, or that you absolutely have to do this, they think they're giving you security or a path forward, and they're not. They're basically imposing kind of their path on yours. And one of the things, the best we can do for people when they're struggling is not to give them the answers. It's to come alongside them while they struggle and support them, because struggling is part of the transformation process. And as a result, when we have to struggle, we develop more confidence and we develop more agency, not just in that moment, but for all the struggles we'll face moving forward.
I've heard, I'm not sure if this is related, I think it could be, there's a part of your brain that literally gets bigger or smaller the harder you do things, the more challenges you have. I forget what it's called. I think I heard it on Andrew Huberman's podcast. I'm not sure.
Yes, I heard that on Huberman's podcast.
Yeah,
I do not remember. It's been a long time since I've been in psychology, so remembering the brain architecture, not a strong suit. Yeah. But yes, I think he was talking about, it used to be that people would say willpower is a myth. Mm-hmm. And because we were trying to think ourselves into something that was, biological drives, habits, all of that. What he said, at least from what I recall from the podcast you and I listened to, was the longer we can postpone gratification, there is a part of our brain that, to your point, becomes stronger, bigger. We always talk about it like it's a muscle. It's not a muscle, but it's a good analogy. So the longer we postpone, maybe it's 15 minutes, we postpone eating that chocolate cake or whatever it is we're trying to resist. Then the next time 20 minutes, next time 30. So whether or not it's really truly willpower, or we're leveraging the parts of our brain that actually allow us to, put off the idea of immediate gratification. Yeah, let's do that. Just, test yourself, push your limits. And again, it doesn't have to be that, oh, I'm not going to eat any sugar now for the next month, and I've been eating sugar my whole life. Okay, what's like today? Could you push it out a half an hour? Could you push it out a day? How do you work towards that?
Mm-hmm. And like you're saying, a lot of times that just goes away. In my experience, you want I want ice cream right now, and you're like, let me go do this. Let me finish this up. Let me finish this project. Let me wait till after lunch, and then it just kind of goes away a lot of the times. Right?
Yeah.
And then I think, to me, when I do this myself, I like the phrase being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And when I think about these things, the more I do these things, the more I jump in the ice bath, the more I get in the sauna, the more I don't want to work out, and I do. The more I do these things, it's to me, it's just building my self-discipline, building up this thing that, kind of in a way telling that, kind of like, bitch ass part of my brain that's like, no, don't do that stuff. Saying, no, listen, I'm in charge. I know we don't want to do this. This is going to be uncomfortable. And then just got it doing it and building that discipline, that will up. I like to think about like motivation and discipline. I like to think about those things kind of the terms of like a car, right? When you're sitting in a car, I think the most maybe best way people would feel this is like an electric car. Torque is what kind of gets you moving. That's what puts you back in your seat. That's what I think motivation is. It gets you moving, but you need the horsepower. That's the discipline. And the discipline is what keeps you in motion, which is the horsepower of a car. So that's kind of how I like to think about that.
I love that analogy. And I think, to your point, what I'm also hearing is starting a lot of times is the hardest point. Once
Absolutely.
you start to get some momentum, you start to get going. It reminds me, I used to have, when I was in school, I had a beater of a car that would die and all sorts of problems. And it's one of those things where if you can get enough of a charge to get, like, if you can just start pushing the car, if your battery's dead, it'll start to, give it enough that the battery will start, and then it will keep going. But sometimes you need a little push. But that if we can just get started and we can build that habit, to your point, then even if your body's, you're waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you want to go to the gym, and your brain's like, no, I want to go back to sleep. When you do that and you build that habit, eventually your body's like, nope, let's go. And so, like, what I'll do is get up and like just stop my brain from processing, and I go to the Nemo place, and I'm like, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just
Right.
keep swimming. And you actually tune out that voice that's telling you not to do it, and you just focus on putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, a lot of times, just like you're saying, it's like, well, I don't want to go to the gym today, but I'm just going to go head over there.
Mm-hmm.
And you're there, and you're like, I might as well just walk in.
Exactly.
And the biggest one for me is I stand in front of my ice bath every morning, and I just stare at it, and I pat my pockets 15 times, and I look around the garage, and I'm just stand in it. It takes 10 seconds, and then all the crap is over.
Mhm.
And it's like, but I stand there for 5, 10, 15 minutes sometimes just staring at it, wandering around, thinking about things, but just training myself to just get in and it's over in 10 seconds and you don't even think about it anymore. It's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yep. Love
When
that.
you're talking about earlier, we were talking about like anxiety and stuff like that. I've heard that a lot of times, I think it's especially with anxiety, we mislabel that as like excitement or nervousness.
Tell me more about that.
So let's say, like, I'm getting ready for this podcast, and let's say I feel anxious, but if I actually examine that, it's like, oh, I'm not actually anxious. I'm excited, or I'm nervous. Like, am I going to do good? Am I going to, are we going to have a great conversation? Or if you're getting ready to go on stage, like, oh, I'm so anxious about this. Actually, no, I'm excited, or I'm nervous that I'm going to perform, or I'm going to do well.
Yes, I agree with that. I think, well, I would say yes, and I mean, again, my guess, my brain, kind of architecture knowledge is a little outdated, but it probably uses a lot of the same circuitry. So, and I don't think it's an either or. I did, plays and musicals when I was in high school. Should have kept doing it because I really liked it, at least as a hobby.
Not too late.
Yeah, but I convinced myself I needed to get serious. So whatever, that's a whole nother conversation.
Sure.
My director one time, because I was really struggling with stage fright. And even when I got on, when I'm nervous, my hands shake. And trying to do recitals on a piano, it was horrible. In plays, I could move my hands. I could do the things to counteract that. But I remember my director telling me, if you're not nervous, you're not ready. Because if you're not nervous, you're not a little anxious, you don't realize what you're about to do, or you don't appreciate how important it is to you. And so to your point, it's a little, we might mislabel as kind of this arousal piece, nervous, excited. So part of it is also, how do we talk to ourselves about that arousal? Because I think one of the big things is, how do we talk to ourselves? What are we telling ourselves? And because that people are going to tell us all sorts of stuff. What are we telling ourselves about that arousal? And how do we possibly change the conversation?
Mm-hmm. And I think it sounds like, to me, it kind of goes back to what you're saying earlier about labeling those emotions. I know it also works when you're talking with somebody else or whatever. You come up to a colleague or a friend, or maybe even just a stranger, and you look at them, it looks like they're not having, and you're like, tough day. Just labeling those things seems to kind of diffuse things and maybe even open up a conversation.
It does. It's so funny. And I think this is important because from a cultural perspective, we a lot of times ask people how they are, but it's not really a question. It's more of like, hi, how you do? One of my really good friends, she moved here from Germany, and, different cultural expectations. She was in an elevator with someone. Clearly, the person was then trapped with her after that. And they said, how's your day going? And she thought they really meant it. And so she started talking, deer in headlights kind of thing. And I actually like the idea, what would it be if you saw someone that was having a bad day, or you thought they were, and you asked the question and you really listened? How different would this world be?
I think we'd have so much more compassion and empathy for the other person. I think a lot of times we don't realize, or we kind of even forget that what that person is going through. The person cut you off in traffic, the person that wants to get ahead of you in line. You have no idea what's going on with their day. Maybe their kid's dying, or maybe they've got to poop, or who knows what it is. They're going through a divorce, their spouse is whatever. They're about to lose their job. I mean, so many things. We just had that empathy. I like that idea.
I love what you just said, because it just happened to me the other day. I was in line at the pharmacy and just waiting, and this guy in front of me kept backing up into me, and I maybe he was trying to just distance himself, the 6 feet or whatever, and it was annoying me. I was kind of like, okay, dude, stop moving. I didn't say anything, and I again kind of assumed that he's in a hurry, he's just not paying attention. And this woman who had been in line, she asks to go back in line. He's like, yeah, sure, blah, blah, blah. And they got on some conversation. Like, she's like, yeah, today's just not been a good day. He's like, oh, I totally know. My wife was just diagnosed with cancer.
Oh.
And like, it took the wind out of me. And then also I could hear him kind of joking, and you knew he wasn't really joking. You knew this was a defense, that he was trying to kind of brush it off because it was a very intimate discussion. And we all know that, like, maybe this is a TMI, but if I turn it into a joke, and at that moment, and I didn't, and I still wonder what would have happened, I wanted to just say to him, I'm so sorry to hear that. And what I struggled with was I will often do that, but at this point, it felt so personal and I wasn't sure if I should intrude or how that would feel for him. After it, I regretted it. I regretted not just saying, that sounds really hard. And then letting him decide whether or not he wanted to engage with me. And to your point, my empathy went through the roof, and all of a sudden him backing into me. I mean, how stupid is that?
Right.
How could I possibly think that was important?
Yes. It's so interesting. I did a podcast with few back, if you guys want to jump back and look, with about kindness and kind of along these lines we're talking about here, with just kind of defaulting to that and just leading with kindness all the time. It's interesting how that comes back around. It seems it's kind of gotten out of society in a way. I'm not sure how it is in the other country, but definitely in America. I know kind of our foundingness is kind of about ourself and about freedom and doing what you want and whatnot. And that's kind of seems a little bit unique to America. But I think it's gotten even more so now about being very selfish and being all about me and I'm all that matters. My victimhood or whatever it is all that matters, and yours doesn't matter at all.
Mm-hmm. Or we're so sensitive to people being sensitive that we kind of put up this wall. And I think any strength taken too far is a weakness. And to your point, other cultures have other strengths that maybe they take too far. The idea of feeling that we can accomplish things, we have optimism. A lot of folks, I remember Ted Lasso saying they were talking about Americans and they're kind of being stupidly optimistic. But we are. But the challenge has been that, yes, we think we can do this. And it does become taken too far. It becomes very singular minded. It becomes really self-focused. And we actually need community. We need to be connected. We are social creatures. And I think to your point, not only taken too far do we think only about me, but it feels like in the last number of years, COVID, other things that are challenging us, we're insulating ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we're disconnecting from community. And I do think that lowers our empathy and our willingness to be kind and understanding.
How can we kind of get past that? I notice when you're saying this, I notice the younger generations, and this I know every generation has always said this. They just, when they're faced with something difficult like this, or they're faced with something uncomfortable, I notice they just walk away, or they just leave. Mm. Even in person, it's like they've taken this ghosting or this whatever to the physical world. Mm. Any thoughts on kind of maybe how we can get back this, maybe get more social, maybe get more away from that, and maybe back to more of our social being?
I think it goes back to what you said earlier, being willing to sit in it. I mean, it's two things, right? There is the emotional intelligence. So there's the awareness and the skill to actually do something about it. If because of, say, COVID or lockdown or a lot of reasons why maybe we haven't honed that skill or it's atrophied because we haven't used that, I think having that emotional intelligence to engage in difficult conversations and sitting with people in difficult emotions, even if it's not directed at you, being able when someone does have cancer or someone's, wife has cancer or something has happened, being able to sit with them in that, because the other thing people tend to do, and this just came up again the other day, was they'll say, "Oh, it's okay," or "It was there's a plan," or "You'll be fine," all this stuff. And technically, I know their intent is to help you, make you feel better, but really, it's making you feel better. So it's making them feel worse because it's making them feel isolated. This has happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you. So I think being aware, first of all, of what we're doing, being willing to sit with people and practicing that, because that alone is a skill. Listening, not giving advice, but truly just asking a question or not saying anything and letting them talk. And then honing our skills around constructive conflict, as they would say, or difficult conversations. Because when we just walk away, we feel like we're stronger. We've put up this barrier. They haven't invaded our boundaries. The problem is you've just reinforced yourself for that. So you've reinforced the idea that barriers are the way to go. And, I used to talk about pulling up the drawbridge. I talked about that. The problem with that is it's hard to put that drawbridge back down. That once we start insulating ourselves against the people we think we need to protect ourselves from, it's also hard to pull it down with the people that we actually want to let in.
I'm not sure if it's a me thing, a male thing, or what. I like to, you're coming to me, you got this problem, you got this empathy. I'm like, listen, I got solutions for you. Like, let it all out. I'm going to write these down and we're going to knock all these out.
Yeah.
How can I get better at that? How can we get better at that? Those of us that default to that.
Well, I love what you said. First of all, just recognizing that might be your MO. And to your point, research, maybe, we talk about, a lot of that. Maybe there is, some gender differences on that. Whether it is or not, it's more important about you. Like, how do you tend to approach these things? First of all, how do you notice when you're doing it? Because if you don't notice it, you can't do anything about it.
Right.
So first of all, how do you notice? And then stop talking. Listen, ask an open-ended question, not a question that's going to, one of the things that's funny is a couple things. People tend to ask yes, no questions, which gives you first of all, it assumes you're going to go one of these two directions. Or they'll say, don't you think X? Not a question. It's a statement disguised as a question. So instead, you can ask a question. It's like, okay, what's going on with that? Or how is that for you? Or it can also be a statement. Tell me more about that. And then just stop talking, because we tend to fill in the blanks that we don't do well with space. We talk about a cultural piece as well. The US tends to be built on the idea that extroversion is the best possible personality. And first of all, we are not all extroverts. Some of the folks who are introverts have actually learned to pass as extroverts, as I want to call it. But we tend to fill space. I do it. So it's like this uncomfortable silence that for us feels like ages, but really it's been like 3 seconds. So sit with yourself, wait until the other person responds. It will be hard if that's not your regular MO. And it's, again, sitting in the comfort, getting comfortable in your discomfort, and just wait and see what happens. Wait and see where they take the conversation. If it is their conversation, self-manage, watch your reaction, and try to truly be present for them. And it's practice. So notice, practice, and just assume you're not going to be perfect. Just like anything else, it's a skill. So work on it.
And I've talked about this on a few other episodes. I like to challenge people, and I like to challenge myself to do this too, is try and have a conversation with somebody where you barely talk. And then when you're done, they're like, that was a wonderful conversation. And I've had this happen, and I'm like, I didn't say anything. But that's when they're able to feel heard. They're able to let that out. That space.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's tough to start, but I think, to me, when I like to talk to, I like to just keep going, and I like to solve everybody's problems. But when you're able to just practice that and just be quiet and really truly listen, the things that come out of people, first of all, are just absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah.
But when you're just listening and you're truly not, like I try to tell my kids and stuff, you might have heard what was happening, but you're not listening. Because you're waiting to talk, or you're waiting for this to be over, or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, waiting to respond. That's not real listening.
No. Change the maybe just a little bit here. What are the most common things people are stuck with?
Wow, the most common. Feels like there's just such a litany of options.
Maybe go top 3. I don't know.
I think. Well, okay. So one of the things is, I think one of the pieces, we look at the different stages of our life, and really it's a continuum, right? But we tend to hit milestones. We tend to hit points. The idea that what's worked for us in the past and what has been our goal and vision in the past should be our goal and vision, and what's worked going forward. And it's that old adage of what worked for you, what got you here won't get you there. It's not just true in our jobs, it's true in life. And so I see people hit certain, milestones in their career or just their journey, and they get stuck because all of a sudden what they've been doing doesn't work anymore, and they don't know what else to do. And so they feel mired in that goo, mired in that stuck. And because we do have this very individualized society overall, they don't ask for help. I mean, we give lip service all the time to, asking for help is a strength, being vulnerable is a strength. Yes. And we still don't do it. So that's, I think, one of the key areas where people get stuck. So before I go on, before I keep going, tell me what you're hearing, or what do you want to say about that?
No, yeah, it reminds me of, these cliches, these old adages, if you want it done right, do it yourself. If I'm trying to think of something else, but so many of these things, it's just like, they're so stupid, but only when it's not you, right?
Yeah.
When it's me, I'm like, of course, I'm just going to fix the toilet. I don't need help. I don't need anybody. Of course I can carry 3 things at once. I don't need your help. But when you're watching somebody else, you're like, I can help you. But it's so interesting to me, but I don't know where I learned or how I stopped or whatever it is, but I don't know. But in my mind, it's just stupid, absolutely stupid. But I think it's taken time. I don't probably recognize where, but I've learned that it's so much easier just to have everybody else help you. Maybe we call it delegation, whatever it is. That is a hard thing to do. It's easy just to always do everything yourself. That's the easy thing. I think the hard thing is to let go and let people help you and let delegation happen and let Bob take on the project. Maybe it's going to be 80% as good as you were going to do it, but you're not doing it. And that's the real thing. And then now Bob's getting experience. And then you're really actually being a better human, a better coworker, boss, leader, when you're letting these other guys take responsibility and do what needs to be done.
Well, and even what you were saying, even in the small ways, you were talking earlier about being open and just listening to someone else. They feel stuck. They may need help. And it can feel like I'm not taking action, so I'm not helping, but stepping back and just listening, that is helping.
I wonder when we're talking about this, is this maybe like an I am kind of thing where it's like, I am the boss, I am the senior manager, I am the doctor? Is there something, maybe a little bit of that, where your personality or your identity is wrapped up in I am?
That was actually one of the next pieces I was going to say is sometimes, to your point, it's a career we've chosen. It's a stage of life we are, like, I'm a mother, I'm a husband. We have these labels and we have these ideas of what that means. And we get our ego gets involved, when it's our job. I am this, I whatever. And I want to be successful. A lot of that also comes to, I have to prove something, whether it's to others or myself. I am, and it's not us. It is something we do. But what's really important is that we try to extract that, because when the label or the stage of life that we're in, when we don't see that as separate from who we are as a person, we can get pulled in all sorts of ways and have to face the expectations of what society says it is to be a good mother or husband or doctor or whatever. Technically doctors have boards that they're supposed to be certified, so maybe a little different. But we have these labels and our ego gets involved that we are supposed to do X because we have this label. And I think that's where people get stuck. And that's also where a lot of people are less likely to ask for help, because they feel there's an expectation, and that by being vulnerable and asking for help, they violated that expectation, or they are not living up to the expectation that everybody else is able, to do. And it's like, yeah, everybody else just has like really good armor. You're not the only one. And that's so important. We are not alone. No matter what you're doing, you're not the only one struggling with this.
It's interesting because from what I see in my experience and whatnot, when you let people know, I don't know how to do this, I don't know what's happening, there's actually more strength in that. And then in pretending or trying to, especially when somebody is an expert or good in this thing and you're pretending like you don't need help and you know what's going on, there's actually more weakness there than just saying, I don't know what's going on, I need help.
Oh, yeah. Our egos do all sorts of funky things to us. They get us wrapped in pretzels. It's But being able to say, I don't know, or I need help, those are very powerful. And not trying to make an excuse or feel bad that we don't know everything there is to know about everything. Because to your point, it's just stupid. It's unrealistic. And yet we convince ourselves that that's what we're supposed to do all the time.
It's funny. It reminds me when my son was, oh man, he must have been like 3 or 4. And he just was, I think it's just maybe access to information, whatever it is. He just knows so much about so many things. And we're just walking, I think we're walking to the park or from the park or something like that. He's asking me about like how far Mars was away or something like that. And I was like, I have no idea. And he's like, he just looks at me with the most disappointed look a 4-year-old can give you. He's like, Dad, I thought you were a scientist. And I was like, dang, man. I was like, listen, son, I don't know everything. He's like, sometimes it seems like you do, Dad. I was like, we just get lucky, buddy. Like, I know most of the answers to your questions, but I just don't know. But that to me was one of the great lessons I think I taught him was just, dude, it's okay to say you don't know. I'm going to find out. Let's look this up. Especially now, I'm just like, I talk to my car. I'm like, hey, Google. And it's just like, and we just start going off on a thing. Yeah. It's so easy nowadays. And like we're saying, I think there's so much strength in saying, I don't know. And it's tough. Like, I know we're both in like the client business and whatnot. And when you ask a question and somebody's paying you thousands of dollars and it's like, I don't know. Well, that's a hard thing to say to somebody when I came to you because I think you know. Yes. That's very tough.
That is. And it's also an opportunity to say, I don't know, and I'll figure that out, or I'll get that, or I will find someone who can help you. I do want to go back with your son. Sure. I think that's a beautiful example of modeling, of being able early on to say, it's okay not to know. I think too often we think what we know, we think intelligence, we think all of that is static, that we're either born with it or we're not. And it is such a load of crap. I mean, we have been fed IQ tests that somehow there's this, authority out there that measures exactly how smart. What exactly does that even mean? It's a number. It's not correlated to success overall. It may be correlated to how well you do on a test, but that's not life. Motivation, tenacity, willing to learn and put yourself out there and try new things and learn new things. That is what success is. And this idea that it's static and that we are afraid people will find out the imposter syndrome, that, oh my gosh, I don't know, and I'm an imposter. That makes us so small. And the willingness to take risks and fall on our face, that's what allows us to grow. That's what makes us successful. And I think it's really what you were showing your son is such an important thing to model for kids, for everybody, but especially for us early on in our lives.
Thank you for that. It reminds me yet another. Yesterday, I've been having some issues with my car. I got brought a brand new car and some trim piece is just not fitting well. Mm-hmm. They brought my car back to my house yesterday. Some random kid dropping it off, and I open the door. And I just lose it because this is now this 3 times and they can't get it done. And my son's standing there with me. And I'm just like, motherfucker. And then the guy dropping off the car, he's just like, listen, I'm sorry, man. It's not you. I know you have nothing to do with this. I'm just upset. Sorry about this. Nothing to do with you. And he wanted me to sign something and say, listen, and then after he left and my son's like, wow, Dad. He's like, most people would have yelled at that guy and never apologized to him, knowing whether they knew it or not, there's nothing to do with him. They would have just taken all their anger and frustration on you and said, not only did you not do that, you told him that this has nothing to do with you and you're sorry and this has nothing to do with him. And I was like, wow, I didn't think nothing of that, but how impressed he was that I was able to just kind of not belittle this guy and not take all my anger out on this guy. I think to me, that's a great example, like you're saying, of showing how we can, maybe not be emotional, maybe control this a little bit, being able to apologize, being able to know I'm wrong and not being wrong.
Yeah. Well, and I think, wow, first of all, your son, he's pretty perceptive. You're going to have to watch him. Yes. You got your work cut out for him in a great way. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think back to what you're saying too, I think people confuse our emotional reaction with our response. In between reaction and response, there's a gap. And in that gap, there's an opportunity for choice. We can do a lot to help with our reactions. People, they do yoga, they meditate, they do all those things. And if we're not there yet and we still have that reaction, we have to recognize that we have choice. That they say, well, I got upset because of this. And it's really funny. A psychologist from way back, Aaron Beck, who used to do cognitive behavioral therapy, said, nobody makes you feel a particular way. Absolutely. Your body may react, right? But you get to choose between reaction and response. And there's a great quote by Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Have you ever read that?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And it's, for those of you out there who don't know him, he survived a concentration camp. His whole family died. And he's known for this quote, and I'm going to butcher the exact phrase, but, nobody can take from you the last of human freedoms, no matter what happens. Nobody can take from you your ability to choose how you respond. And I really hold that, because I think everything that man has gone through, nothing in my life compares to that. And if he can find that choice, if he can find that peace, then I've got no reason to think that I can't do that and be the same.
Yeah, that's a beautiful book. I'll link to that for you guys. It's a short read, but it's profound. And if you guys are into Stoicism as well, that all kind of links together. Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius and all these guys have said similar things. And it's so funny. I like how you were saying that. It's just so beautiful that maybe it goes back to earlier conversation of how we're so self-centered, self-centric, where it's like, you did this to me. I can't possibly do anything to you at all. You've allowed this in your head. You've allowed me to get into your mind and not control yourself, and have a lot of times I think to me it's no discipline, no self-discipline, no accountability. Boy, yeah. One thing that makes me madder than mad at anything is when somebody starts blaming everybody else for their own things.
Oh yeah.
Boy, does that just get me going. Yeah. But that, if we just realized, no, I'm not doing anything to you. Trump's not doing anything to you. The news is not doing anything to you. The comments on Instagram is not doing anything to you. It's how you're reacting, how you're responding. I would even take this one step further, and is when those things bother you, I would examine what about that is bothering you. Why are you so bothered by this? To me, I would think, and the way I think about this for myself is, something in this is true and it's hurting me. And it makes me feel some kind of way. Maybe it's bruising my ego or something like that. And I need to examine this. Like back with my car thing, when I went back to the dealership, it took everything in me to just not be extremely mad and pissed off. And I talked to the guy and I was like, I told him, am I being unreasonable? And he said, you are difficult. And I was like, am I being difficult? And that's instead of saying, I could have easily just gone off on him and took this in a whole nother direction and not took accountability or blame. But I was like, maybe I'm being a little difficult. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. I took that as an opportunity to examine my behavior and how I was handling things. It's like, am I being difficult? I probably am. Mm-hmm. Could I be kinder about it? Could I word these things better? Could I get my point across in a better way, instead of maybe being, gotchas or whatever it was I was probably doing that was hurting his feelings or bruising his ego or something along those lines. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I think you make a good point. And I think, the other piece too with ego, I think there's also a sense of some value of ours is maybe being stepped on, or we feel a lack of control. We feel a lack of control about how someone is treating us or what we can do. And we step into that, and that, again, boundaries go up, anger goes up, we get triggered. And to your point, how do we stop? And again, naming even how we're feeling. My understanding is it pulls us a little bit out of that emotion, at least enough back to the cognitive to help. And one of the things, again, instead of reacting, what question could we ask in that moment? And I was thinking with the gentleman at the car situation, and cars, as they get more complicated, I used to change my own oil when I was a kid. Right. And I don't even know where it is now. Asking him, and again, tone is so important. No matter what you say, if what they hear is, you're an idiot, that, because words, it's like you can say things that sound right, but the tone comes across. You didn't say they were an idiot, but they know that's what you meant.
Right.
Instead, asking him, look, difficult situation. If you were me, what would you do? Mm-hmm. And meaning it genuinely. It's like, not to your point going off. It's like, well, what would you do?
Right.
Sounds different, right? But it's like, help me. If you were me, what would you do? See what they say.
Yeah, that I could just feel how that could be so diffusing from both of us. Mm-hmm. I'm upset at you. You think maybe it's not a big deal, or you're right, or whatever it is. Yeah, I could feel that being diffusing.
Yeah. It's hard to do in the moment.
It is very hard. It's very hard. Mm-hmm. I with back to this thing yesterday, I literally had to walk away because I was so upset. And like I said, when people start blaming and having excuses, that's like the one thing that just throws me off the deep end. I just can't deal. I was like, but I know I literally had to walk away. I was like, because he starts coming to all these excuses and all these different things. And I'm like, all right, I gotta go. Cause I'm just gonna start yelling at this point. And all the words that come out of my mouth after that, it's just gonna make this worse.
Well, and I think, acknowledge the fact that you recognize that. And sometimes in the moment, we have the tools and capacity to deal with it. Sometimes we don't. And sometimes the best thing we can do is to go take a break, regroup, when we can actually come at this in a way that could be helpful and, try something different. But I think recognizing that in that moment, there's probably nothing you can do that was going to be productive. Walking away sounds like a pretty good idea.
It's taken me many years to figure this all out. Don't worry, folks. If it's not happening right now, you can work on it.
Absolutely.
Well, we were talking just a little bit earlier about being stuck and stuff. Something that popped in my head was groupthink.
Yeah.
I personally try to stay away from groupthink. I don't want to be part of a tribe. I don't want to be, part of a thing. I don't understand like these political tribes. I purposely want to stay uninformed and unaware because I don't want to wind up accidentally falling into a group or a tribe, and then suddenly you start justifying, well, my group does this, or my tribe does this, my thing does this.
Yeah.
How do you think about groupthink? How should we maybe think about this, or maybe protect ourselves from it? Or maybe if some parts are good, I don't know, how should we think about this?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is challenging ourselves that it can be an unconscious bias. So one of the questions for yourself might be, how do you know you're not engaged in groupthink?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think it goes back to the best thing we can do is to question it, to challenge ourselves, to actively think, okay, this is what I feel about this situation. Let's say I take the other person's point of view. It goes back to empathy. It goes back to understanding. It doesn't mean you have to agree with someone. And a lot of times we're like, well, I can't give them an inch. I can't give them understanding because they don't deserve it. Mm-hmm. Okay, do you deserve it? Because we're talking about you. We're talking about your understanding, your being connected in, and how do you want to show up? Who's the person you want to be? And how do you actually engage in a way that's more likely to bring that out? So first of all, if you're in something and you're really upset, you may not know. Like there's so many subgroups that we belong to. There's family, country, ethnicity, gender, all of these things. A lot of it is we don't even know how much of that is us versus the groups we're in, because it's almost infinite, the number of groups we belong to. If we're on a particular topic that we're feeling triggered about and you're thinking, no, this is right. Okay, just take a moment. Devil's advocate, just play with it. If I believe this is true, this were true, or if I believed X, why might I believe that? What might I be thinking? In debate, a lot of times, and I wasn't on the debate team because we didn't have one. Sounded like a good idea. Probably should have. You have to take opposing views. And you may not agree with that opposing view, but what if you were to actually have the argument with yourself and force yourself to take that step outside? I irritate the crap out of some of my friends because I try to take I don't always succeed. I am not standing here on a pedestal. I am standing here in the muck of it because it is hard. But really being able to see, well, where are they coming from? Why might they believe this? And being able to sit with that, again, doesn't mean you have to come away agreeing with it, but at least you might understand the other person better.
I like that. Okay. What patterns would we see if we could listen to a leader's self-talk?
Well, probably as many patterns as we could, depending on the individual.
Is there some common things?
I would say one of the things that's most surprising is that people think when leaders get to a certain level, echelon, whatever you want to call it, C-suite, that they're super confident, they know exactly what to do, they're very decisive. I work with leaders at every level, people in general. Last time I looked, people were leaders, or leaders were people, both. The number of people that still struggle with imposter syndrome at every level, genders, ethnicity, all of it, it's amazing. And the fact that they will, with my clients, that they allow me the privilege for them to share that and open up, I am honored, because that is not an easy thing. And that we're hopefully creating a space where they feel comfortable enough to do that. Because I always say, look, it's like what you're thinking, or if you disagree with me or whatever, then tell me, challenge me, let me know, because if we can get it on the table, we can work with it. If you keep it in your head, I can't do anything about it. And I think that ongoing struggle with imposter syndrome, that we think we're not good enough, or we think that someone else is going to find out, or back to your point about, I don't know everything. And then, of course, because we're worried people are going to find out, we stay isolated, we stay insular. And that exacerbates the problem because we think we're the only one experiencing that. Now, I would say with vulnerability, there's always a balance. People earn your vulnerability, and there's different kinds of vulnerability. Finding someone you can be vulnerable with, that you trust, that you can work through some of these things, like a coach, like a therapist, like a really valued, trusted, confidant friend, it is huge, because you start to get outside this idea of it's just me. Because as a leader, my behavior has an exponential impact on an organization. And if I'm making decisions out of fear, and let's face it, all of us are going to be afraid at times. I'm not saying it's going away, but if I am making decisions out of fear, and fear of control, fear of loss of power, fear of people finding out that maybe I'm not what I think I am, or not what they think they are, we do not tend to make the best decisions for ourselves, for the organization, for other people. And as a leader, because of the impact we can have, we have a much bigger responsibility to gain alignment or an understanding of what it means to be engaged and really process that thinking in a way that will benefit the organization and the people, as opposed to keeping them small and at the whim of the decisions you make out of fear.
How would you define imposter syndrome, and maybe what are some of the symptoms of such a thing?
Well, and the beautiful part is, a lot of times on the outside, there aren't symptoms because we're really masking it.
Right.
Which is why most of us run around thinking people in executive positions don't have it. I think internally, what we're experiencing, going back to the gremlins or the inner critics, is they're like, oh, I should know this. Oh, I don't know this. Oh, they're going to figure out that I don't. It's so much of it is the self-talk and the mental pieces and the decisions we make as a result. So again, watching the conversation you're having with yourself, noticing, sitting in it, being mindful of it. So many things we've talked about. First of all, notice it. Just take stock. Like, what am I telling myself? And then challenging it, not eschewing it, not like pushing it away because, oh, that can't possibly be true. Clearly, there's something in you that thinks it is. So let's have the conversation. And then challenging that and testing it, experimenting. I think that's one of the key things is, I'll have coaching sessions with folks, and we may make great progress, and they'll have wonderful insights. And if you don't take that back out into the real world, where the wild things are, it won't matter. Because if it doesn't shift your behavior, it really doesn't matter for your leadership. So being willing to experiment, go out, try, fall on your ass, whatever it is, then you'll start to challenge also that inner critic, that imposter syndrome, because yes, you are going to screw up. And yes, there will be people who judge you. Congratulations, you're part of the human race. Mm-hmm. And there will be times where you realize, Nietzsche, I think, said, that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
Right.
That's not what makes us stronger. What makes us stronger is we fall on our ass and we choose to get up. We make ourselves stronger because we choose to grow instead of letting it knock us down and not getting back up. So experimenting and pushing, it will be uncomfortable. It will sometimes be very unpleasant, and it can be invigorating, and it can be confidence building. And the only way to do it is to get out and take action.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so much of that. Like going back to earlier, right? That self-discipline, to be able to sit in the uncomfortable, fail. I mean, so much things. If we talk, I think we need to rethink failure. A lot of times, I know I've talked about this on the show before. Everything comes from failure. Everything we've ever thought of was because somebody failed before. The way the iPhone is now, the way your computer is now, because somebody made failed prototypes. The Edison made 10,000 light bulbs that didn't work. All complete failure. Everything's from failure. We have to have a better relationship with failure. We have to embrace failure. Failure is okay, especially like we're saying, if you can admit it and take ownership of it and embrace it, there's so much to be gained from failure.
Yeah. And to kind of put it out there too, this does not mean failure is ever going to feel good. In the moment, it can feel good once you get past it. But in the moment, if it sucks, then great. It sucks. And be okay with that. Give yourself some grace. And really being conscious of, okay, what did I learn? Because I learned something. Well, if I allow myself to really examine it, doing the after action review kind of thing, then I can learn. If I just keep making the same mistakes, or I keep retreating back into my comfort zone and say, well, see, I shouldn't have tried that because clearly I don't know what I'm doing, or I can't. No, you get to choose. We will learn something if we, if we fall, maybe even physically. Like fall off a curb. Okay, well then stop texting on your iPhone while you're trying to walk near the street. I learned something. Now, will I put that into action the next time I'm doing that? Well, that's up to me. So that's growth. If I keep, falling over the same curb, well, that's a whole different story.
You know what? One thing I think helps with that is writing down, in whichever way you want to write something down, what you think is going to happen before, your predictions, the outcomes, whatever you want. And then so when you go back after and you do that postmortem and you look back and have that revisionist history in your brain of thinking things were maybe going to be different, and you look back, I think that helps a lot, having that grounded sense of what actually you thought, not what you think you remember. And then going, okay, I did think this was going to fail, or I didn't think that was possibly going to work, or whatever it is. And being able to ground yourself. And I think that helps a little bit with the failure and kind of getting the sting off of it, and it adding an element of able to learn from what happened.
Oh, absolutely. And I like the structure. And I would say yes, and there's also the option to say, here's what I'm going to do. What am I afraid will happen? What's the worst that can happen? What's the best that can happen? And then talk about, okay, if this is the worst, what is that? What's going on? And then if the best, what will that bring to my life? And then flip it. If I do nothing, what's the best that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? Because a lot of times we forget there are consequences to inaction. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times what I see working with leaders and just people in general is, I don't want to take risks. I don't need to grow in this area. I'm fine the way I am. Great. But here's the deal. The world is not going to stand still. We are on a path. So even if you're not stepping outside your comfort zone, the world is going to make your comfort zone smaller because it is going to move on without you. AI is a great example. Mm-hmm. It's this whole revolution, right? And it's one of those where we can say, well, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not okay. Well, you know what? If you're fine with basically not being engaged in any kind of career or in any kind of, or working with technology for the rest of your life, and you want to go live in a cave, great, do that. Everybody else, this is going to happen. There's a lot of, it's kind of the idea of the horse and buggy and the car. It's much easier to see in retrospect, right? You can say, I'm not going to get on board, but the world's going to move on without you. So being clear to your point about what do I think is going to happen? What's the best? What's the worst case? And then being able to look back on it and flipping it. If I take no action, what's the best? The safety piece. What's the worst? What am I going to miss out on? What am I going to lose? Because we are very motivated not to lose.
Yes, the fear aversion, the loss of the fear, whatever, I forget what it's called, but yes.
Fear of missing out, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Loss aversion. That's the word.
Loss aversion. Yeah.
Right. It reminds me of this. This reminds me of the Stoic exercise. I think it's from, I don't know if it's Epictetus or Seneca. It said it's what is it I fear? The scant food, the clothes, laying on the floor. And I took that literally. We did this for a few years where the last Sunday of the month, we ate beans and rice. I showed my kids what this was about. And it's funny because this is pre-COVID. Mm. And what is it like? So what are we scared of? Am I scared of being homeless? Am I scared of sleeping on the floor? Like all these things we're scared of. A lot of times it's so built up in our heads, the reality of it. But if we practice this, literally practice this, sleep on the floor tonight, eat only beans and rice, practice being homeless, whatever you're scared of, just actually practice it. And it's funny, my daughter was like, when we're just eating beans and rice, she's like, this is ridiculous. We live in America. We're middle class, upper middle class. Like there's no way in my life I'll ever have to eat crap. And not but a couple months later, there's a world shut down and there ain't no food on the shelves. And I was like, but you can survive because we've already been through this exercise. And it was kind of a nice wake-up call. Coincidentally, I had nothing to do with it. I didn't plan it that way. But what is it we're afraid of, right? Tim Ferriss has got a great exercise. I'll link it to you guys. It's this fear thing, writing down your fear. But it's a great little kind of worksheet he goes through about what is it you fear? What are we so afraid of? Yeah. But practicing and getting into that and realizing that what we make up in our heads is nowhere near reality. Even the worst case thing you can think of, it's usually nowhere near what really actually happens.
Yeah, to your point, I think that's a really good point. That even, and again, I'm not talking about the extremes of extremes. I'm talking about the extremes of most of what that we're facing.
Yeah.
That even the thing that we're afraid will happen, when it happens, sometimes it's not even as bad as what we imagined it to be, right? It's like, even if that comes true, then what's the worst that could happen? And I like your idea of kind of going back and examining, what was I telling myself? What was the reality of what happened? I mean, not telling yourself so that it to the point where it keeps you from actually taking the action.
Right.
But watching how we all can catastrophize, because our brains are wired for threat. We look for threat. So really assessing, like, how bad was it? Even if that thing happened, or what was the reality versus, to your point, what was I predicting? We're a lot more capable and resilient than we give ourselves credit for.
Absolutely. You talk about authentic leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I do not like the word authentic. I think it's been overused, co-opted. I think a lot of times it's an excuse for a lack of discipline, showing up in a weird way. What is your definition? How do you like to think about that?
I love that. And I do think it's overused. I don't have a better word. So if somebody out there has a better word, please let me know. It's kind of like soft skills. Hate that term. And I started saying, what was it? Kind of critical intangibles. And it's like, I don't think that's going to catch on, but it is what it is. So I'd love, yes, because I think authentic, it gets misused in the fact that I should be able to show up as whoever I am and you all just have to tolerate. That's bullshit. It's like, if you think that's the way the world's going to work and that everybody else should just take you and that you don't have to be accountable for your behavior, no. What I think about it as is, we have a core of who we are. Yes, we have skills. We have other things that are, we're adaptable, we're trainable, learnable, however you want to call it. But there are some core pieces of who we are. We have talents, we have strengths, we have values. We have a core of who we are. And I'm not saying it's static, but I'm saying recognizing who you are in that moment is really important, because the world is so ready to push us into a cookie cutter. Leadership is not a cookie cutter. It's like we push, and I use this term a lot. And so for those of you who've heard me speak, you've already heard me say this, but it's worth repeating, that when we push a cookie cutter into some dough, like let's say it's a little star. Yeah, we come out with a perfect little star to make a cookie. We have also just left all of the rest of the goodness, the dough that's there outside the cookie. When we try to push ourselves into a preformed mold, it's like there's an old Greek myth, Procrusteus, that has he's an innkeeper. He's actually, I think, a demigod, and he's a jerk. And he has this inn, and he has travelers come along, and they want a bed. And he's like, that's fine, but there's only one bed, and you have to fit. So if the bed is too long, he will stretch them like on the rack. If the bed is too short, he cuts them off at the knees or wherever. And the trick is, the bed never fits. Just like the idea that someone else has of leadership never fits exactly who you are. Are there competencies? Of course. Do you need to be a good speaker? Do you need to be strategic? Do you need to be all of those things? Sure. But knowing who you are, strengths, weaknesses, all of it. First of all, that knowledge and awareness, very important. Second, then how do you bring that to what you need to achieve? We're going to have different jobs. We're going to have different organizations. It doesn't mean we're twisting ourselves into a pretzel to make us into something we're not. We're taking that core and we're bringing it to the challenge in the best possible way. And if there are things we need, skills we need to develop, all of that, then absolutely we go out with that awareness and knowledge of who we are and where we're starting from. For me, that's authentic. It's not me trying to lead the way you would. It's not me trying to lead the way Steve Jobs would, whatever. I am who I am. And again, not static, but here's where I am and here's where I start. So how do I bring that authenticity and not trying to be something I'm not to the role to be most successful?
Is this maybe as a starting point, finding your core values?
Could be a lot of things. Could be, I think, a lot of a lot of it is first our strengths and weaknesses, and really our weaknesses, not this, oh, I work too many hours, I'm too hard. It's like we wear overwork as a badge of honor in this culture. It's ridiculous. But being real, like really, what are your weaknesses? And someone asked me the other day is, do you think everybody should just focus on shoring up their weaknesses? I'm like, I think she was surprised because I said, no. Absolutely. I said, it's like that 80-20. You're going to spend so much time trying to overcome that weakness. Now, if it's a fatal flaw, sure. Yeah, do that. But to your point earlier, is it something we can delegate? Is it something that is in somebody else's wheelhouse? Is it something where it's a growth opportunity for someone else? Focus on your strengths, not staying small, not staying safe, but how do you grow that, or how do you use that to take those risks? So we have the strengths, we have the weaknesses, we have our passions, we have our talents, being able to spend time in ways that we think we are serving the company or the organization or your family, whoever, the best, because this is something you're motivated by, you're passionate about, you're good at it, as opposed to trying to constantly fit ourselves into, well, this is what it should be, so I'm going to push this into that. We do have our values. We have what's important to us. And it's important to recognize that, because the world a lot of times is going to be at odds with that. Okay, so what are the values that absolutely have to fit for you in this situation? Like, what are non-negotiables? And also, how can your values show up in this space? Because we also get very rigid sometimes about, okay, my value means X. It's like, maybe not. But how do you be true to that core? And then understanding all of that to me is really understanding who we are, because we are multifaceted. It is not just one thing. And we'll learn along the way, because maybe there's also something we just don't know. And all of a sudden, the world shows up and it gives us a chance to learn a little bit more about how we operate.
Absolutely. I like to think of, when you're talking about the different weaknesses and strengths, I like to think about this like on a scale of like 1 to 10. Like, let's say writing, I'm a 3. If I work my ass off and I did everything I can, what am I going to get to, a 5? I don't know. Versus communication, let's just say I'm an 8. If I work my ass off, can I get to a 9 or a 10? Sure. What's more valuable? What's more important? Where can I continue to be world class? I can be world class at the things I'm already good at, and then shoring up. You're saying shoring up those other things. Like, I should get to maybe a 4 or 5 so I can communicate better. But I'm going to bring in somebody that's an 8 or a 9, and I'm going to let them handle this piece. Yeah. But I'm going to be able to understand what's happening, because I have a little bit of competency where I can say, oh, I see what you're doing here. This is what I want, or something like that. Being able to intelligently talk and maybe direct or give guidance or something like that for the other.
I absolutely agree. And I'll go back to what you said earlier about authenticity as well. It also doesn't give leaders the excuse to say, oh, well, I'm not good at this, so I'm not going to do this. For example, I worked with a leader who, as an extrovert, liked to just wing it when he would go up and do a town hall or whatever. He's like, well, no, this is just who I am. You suck. So as a leader, you choosing not to prepare because that's just who I am, that's also not okay. So anything taken to an extreme it can really be a weakness. And thinking, again, because I can just be who I am, especially if I'm the CEO, well, as long as you're willing to have people who are disengaged, your communication's not clear, and people aren't following you because they don't understand your vision, great, do that.
I couldn't set it better myself. What is a popular leadership trend you think is overrated or even harmful?
Well, I think some of them are really clear. I'm trying to think of something maybe that I'm seeing that's different. I think one of the trends, I actually just wrote a blog post about this, is we have this idea of, okay, we're going to develop leaders. Best intention, right? A company says, okay, we're going to develop leaders. A lot of times we have this very static leadership development program. We have this module, this module, this module. Everybody goes through it. It's a really nice assembly line. And, you come out and you get a Lexus. Well, okay, that's not true. So we have this very static approach. And then we don't get the development we think we need. Somehow, needing to develop leaders in a dynamic environment that's constantly changing and unpredictable, static development doesn't seem to give that to us. Imagine. And yet, do we go back and look at how we're doing this, or do we just blame the leader? We just blame the leader. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then we say, oh, this development stuff doesn't work, so we're just not going to invest in it anymore. And it's like, That's like saying, I expected to triple my investment in stocks. And what I did was I hid the money under my bed. And now I'm shocked that it hasn't grown magically since I've been there. And by the way, my house had a fire and all my money burned to the ground. Okay. So I think it's really challenging ourselves to understand what does it take to develop leaders, not just for today, but what they're going to need to do. And I say this as though it's easy. It's not, but it goes back to, again, understanding a leader, understanding where they are, first of all, where they're going to grow, where they want to go, and not assuming where they want to go just because they are on this track that you've created. What's going to help them get there? And by the way, everybody owns this. People a lot of times just kind of say, oh, well, HR owns developing leaders. It's like, no, it's like, and then as an executive, I can just walk away. No, everybody owns this. It takes a village. It takes a village to build a leader. It takes a village to build an idiot. You choose. So you've got executives who invest. And when an executive, for example, shows up to maybe there's a culminating piece of the leadership development, someone's taken on this stretch assignment or this role, and they're going to come back and talk about what they've come out of, this and what they're going to do and what the impact is they have. Having executives in the room is so powerful for these folks to get visibility to maybe people they'd never have. And for an executive, they think it's nothing, right? They think, well, I'm just here. They don't recognize the power their presence has. The team leader, whoever this person reports to, being engaged along the way, being able to help understand, well, what are you learning? How are we applying this? That it's a dynamic kind of, opportunity. Mentors, coaches, all of these things. The idea that, again, we just take people through an assembly line, then you're going to get a very static, consistent, well, really nothing, because people will normally walk away and say, well, that was a waste of time. Mm-hmm. So you might as well do nothing. But if you can actually put together a way of looking at it, and it doesn't even have to be revolutionary. I mean, we're talking like information, great, foundational, go out, experiment, come back, coaching, what is it you specifically need to work on individually, mentoring, who are the people you could learn from? And by the way, it's not always somebody up in the organization. It could be somebody outside, could be somebody that has a lower title than you. Like if I don't know AI, maybe I go to somebody that is like a genius at it. But if I'm a director and they're a manager, I think, all of us have something to learn. All of us have something to teach. So this idea of static anything, dynamic, look at what's truly going to prepare the leaders and then invest in that. Otherwise, don't bother.
Yeah, how are we doing this? Are we giving them a project, like the guy you see some potential in, or maybe the top performer on your team or whatever? You're like, hey, let's get him a little lightweight project, nothing too crazy, nothing. Is that how we're thinking about this? What are we, other than, like you're saying, classroom training? Is this more of a OJT kind of thing? How are we thinking about this?
One thing, challenging yourself to assume that you already know what he wants or she wants or they want, right? Because I had a beautiful manager early on, and he knows I tell people all this all the time, is he sat me down and I was doing market research at the time, trying to figure my way from psychology to what I do now, behavior, people, data, figured, okay, give it a shot. We sat down at our annual review and he's like, so do you want to be a director of strategic marketing? And I said, not really. And I know he was kind of taken aback, but he's like, okay, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do organization development. And he's like, great. What is that? And that is a great manager. It is really understanding where you want to go and helping you get there, because it benefits not only you, it benefits the organization, it benefits all of it. So understanding, okay, first of all, where are people motivated to go? What are the opportunities and where do you need them to go in the organization? Because if tomorrow I want to be an astronaut and I'm working at the local grocery store, I don't know that they really need me to become an astronaut. So maybe it's also maybe a different path or outside the organization. And I would challenge back to what you said is maybe it's a little step. Really? Why not give them something huge? Why not give them something that's really going to stretch them? And again, you come alongside them, you got support. You don't just send them out, throw it over the wall and go. And then as the person who technically has owned or has done this, kind of led this role before, how do you get out of your own way? Like, how do you make sure you're not jumping in and saving them when really they need to struggle? Yeah, again, not fatally, throwing people in the deep end, letting them swim. You're not going to let them drown, but we have to struggle. So where are you going to challenge them? Where are you going to get them outside their comfort zone? Where are they going to have agency in how you come together and create this? And then stopping them. So many leaders are like, well, I can't let them fail. I can't let them this. Well, you're not going to hand them the keys to, being in front of, the entire board the first day on their job. It's like, what's a stretch assignment for them? And then do that and support them.
It reminds me of a story from IBM. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but some guy, junior guy or something, he wanted to do something cost them $10 million. And he walks to his boss' office and says, I'm done. I'm fired. And he walks in, the boss is like, hey, whatever. He's like, well, I guess it's been fun working. He's like, where are you going? He's like, all right, fire. He's like, no, we just spent $10 million training you. No. That's interesting. Is there a best time in maybe you're in a career, whether not necessarily age per se, but you're new to the job and maybe somebody sees something in you, whatever. Is there a time where you go like, hey, I should go talk to Jerry right now? Looks like he's got a good grasp on his job and maybe he wants to be a leader. Is there some type of timing or something that helps develop somebody or talking to them? Or
I would say keeping a pulse. I think one of the biggest disservices we do is do annual performance reviews. I think we should just get rid of them. I think they're absolute crap. What are you doing? You're waiting for a whole year to give somebody feedback on what they're doing. You're waiting a whole year to get their input on their career and what they're doing. Nothing should show up in a performance review that's a surprise to the employee. You should have been having these conversations all the way through, because here's the deal. If I don't know what I'm doing is wrong, I can't fix it. If I don't know what I'm doing is right, I won't necessarily keep doing it. So keeping your finger on the pulse, having regular conversations, one-on-ones are a great thing. People misuse them all the time, and they become one of those meetings. They're like, oh, well, it's not important. I don't have anything to talk about. It's like, yeah, you do. It's a touch point. And I'm not saying it's easy to do this, but it could be 15 minutes. We're not talking. I talked to one leader. It's like, well, it's hard to get an hour with each of my people every week. I'm like, an hour? What are you doing?
Yeah.
And just having, those regular conversations and encouraging people to bring them to you, because you may not notice. You probably won't notice the first flicker of insight that they have that maybe they're interested. But if you're having regular conversations, then you'll know when something starts to shift, because it might be different for you than it would be for me. Even if we're on the same trajectory and the same path, we're not the same person. So trying to predict where that's going to happen, you might, but it's also kind of like, shaking a magic 8-ball for those of you who remember that. It's like, you might be right, you might be wrong. Wouldn't you rather know?
It reminds me of some of these like great founders, maybe like Sam Walton's coming to mind, where you're walking the floor, you're out there with everybody, you're talking to the employees, you're seeing the trends, you're just out there in the field, in the nitty gritty of things, looking, seeing.
Yep, I agree. I think it's so easy, especially there's a great book, Leadership is Language, and it's a follow-up. I can't remember the name of the author, to turn the ship around.
I'll link it.
Yeah, loved it. And the Leadership is Language is more of a how-to book. And he talks about the fact that as leaders go up in an organization, people start to edit themselves. They start to not tell you things. And the leader still sees themselves as the person that's, down, sleeves rolled up, all of that. And I've had folks tell me that, no, they still see me this way. I'm like, you do, they don't. I can guarantee you, you may have a few people, but you end up with the emperor who has no clothes. People won't tell you, right? That things are going off. And unless you can be down, and because the longer you stay in the ivory tower without, to your point, getting on the floor or at least connecting with people, they still may not tell you exactly what kind of like what you hope they hear, because there's always going to be a power differential. Even in the US, we like to think it's super flat. It's flatter than other places, but it's not 100% flat, and it shouldn't be. People still need to make decisions. Somebody does. But if you can bridge that gap and spend less time in the ivory tower, more time where the work is being done and how you're connecting to the business, to the people, you're going to be far more successful in really having a pulse on what's going on and understanding where things may need to shift so that you aren't the emperor who's walking down the street and has no clothes. It'd be nice to not have to wait for the little child on the road to tell you that you have no clothes, as opposed to all the people around you who really don't want to look stupid in front of you. How do you make sure you're connecting with them and understanding what's really going on?
It reminds me of, I'm not sure if it was a book or a podcast I was listening to where the guy, they do mergers and acquisitions, and their policy is every time they acquire a new company, they go and ask every employee, what are we doing horribly here? What would you change? And also conversely, what are we doing well that you would keep? And I love those questions. I'm trying to implement that into things I do as well. You're asking the people, especially on the front lines, what are we doing that's stupid? What can we do? Because I mean, it reminds me of this massive worldwide chain. I was in there one time with my daughter, and all these fancy computers, right? I mean, they scan the clothes, and then the lady starts typing, and I'm like, what is she doing?
Yeah.
So I said, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I'm inputting the size and the color and the style. I'm like, you scan it, it just doesn't have this. But what I think has happened is that's how they used to do it 30 years ago. And nobody has ever walked in the store and understood, why are we still doing it this way? And nobody says anything. We just keep doing what we've been doing. And if you were to serve it, because I couldn't understand why the line was so long. There's 6 of us. Why are we standing here for so long? And then we got to the front, I understood what was happening. Nobody's come down and audited that in probably 20 years.
There's this great approach too, because in terms of that, there's also, when we have challenges, human beings create workarounds, and we get to the point where we don't even remember or don't recognize the workarounds we've created because we've been doing it so long. And it's called ethnographic research, which is basically, what anthropology is. You go in, you observe. And I want to say it was Quicken Loans that did this, where they would send people in, or maybe it was QuickBooks, actually, one of the Quicks. And they would send folks in to kind of sit beside users as an experiment, and they'd watch them, and they would say, well, why are you doing that? What is that? And then they would be able to see some of the workarounds that people had created and the flaws. And to your point, if someone had been in the store, someone who knew what efficiency looked like, continuous improvement, all of that, and you just watched what the person was doing, and you asked questions with curiosity, not with, again, the tone, you're an idiot, but like, okay, why are you doing that? What is that? What does that give you? And then being able to take that step back and see, this is what, because people may not even know what's going wrong, but being able to have that view and bring that perspective, then you can really improve the system, because sometimes we don't even realize the water we're swimming in.
Absolutely. You talk about people not unlocking their full potential. What's one unconventional barrier leaders or people never realize is holding them back?
Well, usually it's themselves. I mean, fundamentally, going back to your point, I'm not even sure that's unusual, but it's prevalent, ubiquitous. So you were saying earlier about, we were talking about mindset. We were talking about how we think. We were talking about, the impact that has. And I think one of the biggest pieces is someone told me, it's like, we were talking about the potential and what they could do. And he said, oh, don't worry. He's like, I know what I'm capable of. I'm like, that's your mistake. You have no idea what you're capable of. And he thought it was a positive. And what he didn't realize, he was capping his own potential. And we do that all the time. We think, oh, I'm not capable of that, or I've reached my potential, or maybe, I already know I can do X, Y, and Z. Really, how do you know you can't also do M, J, and Q? So I think that's one of the biggest pieces. It's, again, it's not revolutionary, it's ubiquitous, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better.
I know with physically our bodies, our brain caps us out at about 40% of our capacity. So we hold back 60%. I like to think that, I like to take that and expand that to my mind as well. If I'm, like you're saying, if I think I can do it all, and I'm only at 40%. I know there's more in the tank. Now, it's hard to get that extra 60 out, even physically, mentally, with skills and stuff like that. That's how I like to think. I don't know if you have anything similar to how you think about that as well.
I think, and I, like, to your point, I don't know what capacity we use or don't use or what I'm using. I do know I'm probably spending too much time on YouTube, which I don't think is probably the best use of my brain.
It depends what you watch, I think.
It depends. Yeah. Good documentaries here and there. I think that's probably pretty good. I think that when we challenge ourselves, one of the things, they've talked about is, okay, the simple version of this is brushing your teeth with, if you're right-handed, you brush it with your left hand, and you're starting to trigger paths in your brain that either aren't there or they haven't been kind of used in a while. And the more we can challenge those paths, the more, we talk about plasticity, plastic, whatever, and plastic seems rigid, but more flexible, we'll say, that our brain is. And being able to find those routes. I was listening to someone do a speech a long time ago, a presentation about the brain, and someone had had a stroke. Mm-hmm. And the brain this person was older, it wasn't a child, but because of the way they were engaging, and because of, and again, maybe this is correlational, but the idea was of how they'd really been using maybe their brain or their capacity before, that this person, the brain rerouted more quickly. It was almost, the way I looked at it was almost like there was a big traffic jam, but I have a GPS system, and it'll tell me that if I take this road and I take this side road, it'll get me around that traffic jam. We may not clean that up for a long time. And for those of you who are neurologists out there, you can tell me I'm full of crap. So it's an analogy. But I think the more we stimulate different areas of our brain, first of all, I think that's where creativity comes from. Connecting one thing in one area to one thing in another, and doing the things that are easy. I use this app Elevate to try to train my brain or exercise my brain. And I love language. So the language ones are really easy for me. And I like math, but it's, I haven't used it much since I left. We got these calculators now, whatever. And I find those hard. And so I gravitate towards doing the things that are already easy for me. And it's a little different back to using strengths, et cetera, but I'm learning. I'm trying to expand my brain. And doing the things that maybe aren't as much fun, going back to, Huberman, like, kind of pushing ourselves to do things that maybe aren't as good. For example, learning a language, or maybe if you're already, liking that, maybe you learn a musical instrument, maybe you go out physical, being in exercising and all of that, blood flow to the brain, doing different things and creating those pathways. And I think it makes it easier for our brain to not only connect the different pieces, but it creates new roads that, either weren't paved before, or maybe they're overgrown. I love an analogy that my psychology professor gave me as an undergrad. When you're learning language, a lot of people will say, oh, I learned that and I've lost it. The way he said it is, when you build information, because there's no indication that we have limited capacity at this point. I mean, the way we would think at some point we'd hit capacity. But what he said is that if you learn something, you learn this language, for example, it's like a cabin in the woods. If you go to that cabin every day, the path is very well worn, very easy to get to. If you stop going to the cabin, the path, grows over, you end up like maybe a tree falls, hard to get through, but that cabin's still there. So kind of challenging those paths, even reestablishing them, connecting them, that's where we really can take our capacity, our understanding, and even our connection to other people. It exponentially grows. Because back to your point about just needing to listen, I had someone tell me like, oh, I love talking to Rachel because I can talk to her about anything. It's like the stuff that he was talking about, I don't know, like, the ins and outs of that, but I can ask questions. I can be really curious. And as a result, our connection grows, and hopefully a few synapses, new connections are made. So it's kind of went down. Yeah. Kind of talking about
I love it.
things.
I love it. No. A couple things I'd like to highlight. There's a great book by, I think she was a neurologist, where she had a stroke and she documented it all. She wrote this fabulous book about having the stroke, going through it, and her recovery. I'll link this for you guys if you're interested. It's a fabulous book on how that whole kind of thing worked for her. And it's an interesting perspective because she was a neurologist. I think she's a neurologist. If not, I'm sorry. But she was like, she says, I was in the shower and I was like, I'm having a stroke. And she's like, this is great. Like, this is the best experiment ever. And
I'm not sure she said it was great, but yes, she was very aware.
This is what she was saying to herself in a way. You got to, if you're interested in the book, it's a great book, and how she thought of it from her perspective and the experiments and going through it and getting back from all that. It goes to a testament about how our brain will rewire. It'll let the traffic jam be, and it'll find a workaround. It's a great testament to that. I'll link to that if you guys are interested.
I think too.
So
I can't think of the name of the book, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
I can't think of it for the life of me either. I think she wrote 2 books, and I think there's maybe a TED Talk as well.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Nevertheless, it's in my book list. I'll link it for you guys if you're interested. Fascinating stuff. How our brains just. I used to think when I was younger, I don't know where I got this stupidity from, that our brains were limited, and I was like, I actively taught myself to discard information that I thought was worthless. I was like, I'll never meet you again. I don't care what your name is. I'm not going to attempt to remember it. I have a limited capacity in here. You are unimportant. And when I realized how stupid that was, it was very, very hard to unlearn and relearn just some simple things like remembering people's names. To this day, I still have a little bit of a problem with it. If I feel like you're unimportant in a stupidly egotistical way, I guess. I don't understand where I get this from. But it does seem like there is an unlimited capacity for our brains to just keep the things that pop up in our head sometimes. Interesting. Where was that lying in there somewhere? I was 4 years old. How did that? But some little thing, a smell, a sound, especially if you have children, I think you can really bring this home where my kids will say something to me and I'm like, oh, wow, I remember when and it's like, where did that come from? But it's in there. The cabin's in there. You just gotta weed whack the path.
So even talking to you, little triggers for me are coming up. 2 more books. One, there's a great book. It's called Moonwalking with Einstein.
Okay.
So it's about a journalist who went to cover a memory competition. So, the folks that do all that, and he was flabbergasted. And one of the people he talked to said, this isn't rocket. It's like, it's something you can do too. And he really didn't believe him. They talk about the idea of the memory palace and the fact that we're leveraging visual memories for other content. It's fascinating. And he goes and he decides that he's going to go take a year or whatever it is to learn how to do this and compete. So it's a really interesting read in terms of us all expanding our memory and working with it. The other book is called From Strength to Strength, and I have it sitting here somewhere. And I think part of that is we get this idea that after 40, is it right here? It is. From Strength to Strength, finding success, happiness, and deep purpose in the second half of your life.
Perfect.
Sure, you can see that.
I'll link to these guys.
Yeah, so Arthur Brooks. So we kind of get into this idea as, oh, I'm getting older. Oh, I can't learn things. We even have stupid, like ideas that, oh, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. One of the things that I like in this is that, and I'm not saying this has to be true or limit our mindset, but in a general, our brains tend to be more kind of flexible and agile and using things like maybe quick computations of math and things like that when we're younger. And maybe we do then slow down as we get older. As we're older, the next strength is that we have this huge, vast repository of knowledge and information that's connected to things. And we're able to draw on that in a way that when we were in our 20s, 30s, we couldn't. Mm-hmm. So it's not about not being able to teach old dogs new tricks or, well, we can all think we're stupid when we're a certain age when we're young. But recognizing the strengths we have and leveraging those throughout our lifespan, because we can always be learning. And to your point, as far as I know, science knows, they haven't at least found the tipping point or the capacity that we may have hit. So, don't underestimate the power of what you can learn and what you can bring and the wisdom you have.
Strange fun fact here. Do you know where the memory palace comes from?
I do not.
So it was back in Greek or Roman times or whatever, the palace that fell down. And then I think it was some famous person was like, oh, who was in there? And he was like, oh, Rob was standing by the pillar. And then Janet was over by the cathedral. And that's where that came from. He used the palace. And he kind of walked through the palace and remembered where everybody was standing when the palace collapsed. So they knew who was inside. And that's where that technique comes from.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah. One of those things that are in there in my brain somewhere for some reason.
Absolutely.
What's one invisible script that keeps people from having honest conversations, and how can we help break that?
When you say honest conversations, tell me a little bit more. What do you mean?
Telling ourselves the truth, being honest with ourselves. I think it starts with ourselves. We lie to ourselves so much. For so many different reasons, right? A lot of times, like we said earlier, right? They're a habit, or there's something that some well-meaning person told you when they were younger. Maybe somebody said, that's silly. A lot of times they're things that I never got to accomplish. I'm like, why? Because I couldn't go in the NFL. I'll tell my child, you can't go in the NFL either. These are invisible scripts that are running in our heads, right?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I think there's something, if you if you have that running and you're not aware of it, and you can't be honest with yourself, then you can't truly find out what's the problem or what's the solution or whatever it be.
Yeah. It's a good question, because one of the things that comes up is there's the honest conversation with other people. And to your point, honesty can have different layers. The honest conversation with ourselves is harder, because part of it is we've been using these scripts for so long, we don't even remember where they came from or why they're there. And if or not they're true, we don't even recognize it when we're using them. So I think one of the questions might be, how do you even figure out when that might be happening? And maybe the question more is, some scripts may be benign. Like they may be something like, well, I don't like oysters, which I keep trying because my husband does like them, and it's not a script. I don't like oysters, but I try them once a year just in case everything changes.
Yes.
Or my taste buds die. Anyway, so for those of you who like oysters, just pretend I didn't say that. So I think the priority is probably, because there's probably thousands, if not millions, of scripts that are running in our head. The priority probably is, where is this causing us problems? Where is this getting in our way? And I think some of that, going back to, we talked about full circle or multiple circles and loops, that arousal or that anxiety or what we're feeling. I like to talk to leaders because a lot of them, they don't like the idea of emotions. They're like, oh, emotions. Well, first of all, we make most of our decisions based on emotion, whether we like, and then we use logic to kind of justify it, right? And the reality is we have emotions. So if you are ignoring them, you are leaving data on the table. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean, going back to reaction and response, it doesn't mean we have to do exactly what those emotions are telling us, but they're telling you something. So there's maybe a red flag or there's something nagging at you. Maybe there's a fear that shows up. Maybe there's an insecurity that shows up. So there's the visceral, and then your interpretation of the visceral. And stopping and then having that conversation, not that you're talking to yourself about what you can or can't do in that moment, but the conversation with yourself about, what is that? What's going on? What am I experiencing here? And I did that the other day. That's when I was writing. It was like, something's making me anxious. Okay, so what are you experiencing right now? What are some of the thoughts that are coming through your head? No judgment, just, kind of research with yourself, like kind of your own little, internal anthropology or therapy, whatever. So really starting to look at and challenge where you might be doing those things and where are they not serving you. Because like I said, there's probably thousands, if not millions, of scripts running. What are the ones that are most important for you? Because those are the ones that are keeping you from stepping in your potential or from doing the things that you really want to do and becoming who you really want to be.
I love that. That's beautiful. That's a great perspective. So as I was looking through your things, I noticed you like to live a little dangerously and use humor. How do we navigate humor? It can be maybe a tricky space.
Oh, it's very tricky.
How do you use it? What are maybe some techniques? How can we maybe use humor in whichever way you like to practice that?
It is tricky. And just as another resource, we're going to have a list of books. There's a book called Humor Seriously. It's probably on my bookshelf. It's written by a couple of women that work in Stanford. One, I think, is more of a traditional professor. The other one is also a lecturer, but she came also out of business and improv. And they, in the MBA program, they teach humor and the idea that it serves you in life and in business. And it's funny because in the book's really good. The book's funny too. They talk about giving this assessment, and apparently folks get just as much credit for this class as they do for, say, taking finance. So it's equally weighted. They have them go through an assessment to say, when was the last time you laughed out loud? Mm. And they said a lot of people struggle with that. I read that and I thought, well, I don't know. What time is it? It's like, if I don't laugh out loud at least several times a day, then I probably have the flu or something. I think it is. So a couple of things. One, when I was younger, I used sarcasm more as a defense mechanism. And
me too.
Right. And it's like, and I wielded that sword with, precision, like rapier sharp wit kind of thing. And it did its job. It defended me and it kept people at arm's length, at least, because that sword was kind of long. And it didn't serve me. And it's the idea of humor doesn't need to belittle other people. If you and your friend, for example, are agreed on what's a joke and what's funny, then that's fine. You all have that relationship. You have that agreement on what's funny. If not, and you kind of start using those same approaches, it's not okay to make fun of somebody else. And I don't say this in the world that, like, oh, we're not supposed to offend someone. You can go ahead, offend somebody. Just be prepared for the consequences, because there will be. So if you're at work and you say something that's really super offensive and making fun of someone else, then just be prepared for what the repercussions might be for you. That's true of any behavior in life. If you're willing to suffer the consequences, then go ahead and do that. If you want to wield humor in a more productive way, because I truly do believe that when humor is used productively, I think, for example, it opens people up to vulnerability. Not sitting necessarily in, an audience watching someone perform on stage, but when you're in a group, I don't know, being able to laugh together in a way that it's truly open. It's very hard to be defended when you're laughing with someone. And I love that. And I honestly I find life funny, and I love to laugh. I would say the other piece is, it's okay to make fun of yourself. It's not okay to make fun of somebody else. Now, I will say that you'll see a lot of research and things that you have to be careful with self-deprecating humor, especially, say, women, because we tend to do it and it gets interpreted differently. But a lot of it is also how you come across in your delivery of that humor, and just owning it, and the knowledge that I do X, Y, and Z. And sometimes you are going to step over a line. Sometimes you are going to hurt someone. No intention. You weren't doing that. Okay, well, can you say I'm sorry? I mean, is that in your, kind of portfolio of things you can do? So I think it's a balance, but I think people too often think it's too dangerous, or there's all of these things, and we're afraid of offending anybody in the world right now. And it's not a good place to be, because then everybody is shrinking back, and just knowing that we will make mistakes, but oh my gosh, the ability to laugh and to make people laugh, it is just, I think it's a huge release. And I'm sure, if you look at the science behind it, I'm sure there's dopamine. I'm sure there's all of different kinds of chemicals in your brain that fire off that do so much good for us, especially in a world that takes itself way too seriously. And it's not that it's not serious, right? I'm not saying make light of it, but in terms of meaning, like, don't appreciate what's really going on. But we can't be serious and intense all the time. It's not healthy, and it really doesn't help prepare us and help equip us to deal with the reality that's out there.
I love that. I like how you frame that. There's something, it reminds me of like breaking bread with somebody. There's something seems like something is there when you're talking about this. This is what I kept going back to in my head was that, there's something like maybe a lightness that comes in, maybe some type of bonding that goes on when you get to laugh, break bread, these types of social things like we talked about earlier, right? That maybe you're lacking from life when you don't allow comedy or laughter or maybe some light teasing in a way where it's good-hearted. You miss that connection, you miss that social bond. I think something's there. I like what you're talking about with that.
Yeah,
I wasn't going to shy away from humor at all. I was just maybe some tips to keep me out of trouble. I've gotten good at saying I'm sorry. I'll tell you right now.
That's actually a very important skill. And that is actually a part of being vulnerable, is being able to say, I'm sorry. So I will say,
especially when I don't mean it.
Oh, well, that's a different conversation. Maybe the question in your own mind is, why don't I mean it? Like, what's going on?
I usually don't mean I'm sorry because I actually wasn't. It's like, you're now crying because you can't handle the truth. And I was a little harsh. So I'm sorry for my part, but not your part, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to be a dick, but it's kind of how my brain works about it.
Well, we all own our own reaction to things. I will put it that way. The one thing I would say is, and this goes back to when I'm working with leaders, I like to consider myself direct and supportive, meaning I will tell you the truth meaning I will tell you my version of the truth. It's how I see it. It's not unbiased. You're not unbiased. Nobody's unbiased about ourselves or anybody else. We got our stuff, right? Direct and harsh / asshole are not the same things. And that's why people confuse the two. And again, me telling you something in a way that I think I'm sugarcoating it, but you still get the idea that I think you're an idiot. That's not helpful. And the sugarcoating just makes things unclear. And so people are likely to not understand and therefore do the thing you don't want them to do. And then you think they're an idiot. It's like, no, not really. You were really not clear. So it's one thing for me to say something. I can tell you, it's like, I'm really upset with this. I'm not understanding why this happened and that kind of thing. Or I can tell you that, you really, when you said this was my experience of that. So it's not even that you hurt my feelings or whatever, because I'm not saying you did. I'm saying, here's my experience. So sometimes in those conversations, someone's going to get upset. Let's assess again. Yes. Are there times when some things, there's even times I feel overly sensitive. I'm just having a bad day or something's piled on, or the gentleman in front of me at CVS, whose wife was just diagnosed with cancer. We don't know what's going on in somebody else's life. But it is about, well, something happened. What is this? What's going on? So I think it's, so there's different ways, and we'd have to look at specific examples. But if you're not sorry, let's look at it. Like, what's going on? Like, and again, not saying you're an asshole. I'm saying something's happening and there's some disconnect.
I could definitely be a bit of an asshole at times. I don't mean it. My sister is really good. She says I lack empathy, and I think she's right. There's a lot of things I don't have any empathy, and I have no sympathy for your stupidity and the dumb things you do. But if I'm telling you these things, I'm going to also be your biggest cheerleader. Let me tell you right now. I'm going to make sure you get this done, and we're going to work through this, and I'm going to support you, and I'm going to tell everybody about it. I don't know. I'm sure that's my character flaw.
Well, you know what? It's all about, how we show up in the world and how we engage and the impact we want to have. And you know what? If we're having the impact we want to have, then we must be doing something right.
I agree. I think I am. And that's it. This is kind of the show and some other things I do. It's like being legendary, right? How can we show up? How can we do these things to lift others up so they can have a legendary life, or and then that makes my life legendary in a way. And it's not a grandiose type of thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like we talked about so many things we talked about, grounding all these things in being a good leader and finding and helping the other people and showing compassion and all these different things we talked about here just today. And that's kind of what I think about. And that's kind of how I like to try and live and emote myself. And I hope it catches on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It reminds me of the analogy, the little boy, walking on the beach, and all of these starfish have kind of washed up on shore, and now the tide has receded, and he's walking along and he's picking up a starfish and he's throwing the starfish back into the sea, and he picks up another starfish, and he's like somebody comes along and says, that doesn't matter. There's no possible way you can throw all these starfish into the ocean. It doesn't matter that you threw that starfish back. And he's like, it matters to him. Mm-hmm. It matters to this one. And I think what you're saying is important, because it's the Emerson quote of, if even one life has breathed easier because I have lived, that is to have succeeded. We don't have to do things like on a grand scale. I don't have to change the world. Great. If I could, that'd be wonderful. Well, depending on how I change it, because sometimes, who knows. But if I can change one life, if I can have a positive impact, and I may never get to know what those are. People may have an experience of me that really is really powerful and really impactful. All I can do is to create the environment where that is most likely to happen. Yes, sometimes specifically, I know what I'm doing to help them. I may not know kind of the ripple effect it has, hopefully for good, but don't limit yourself to, if I can't change the world, then I can't do anything. It's like, that's not true. You can affect at least one life. So do that.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
So if we want to learn more about you, get in contact with you guys, we have, hopefully I'm saying this right, catamentum.com.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. We have your book, Butterfly Goo. We talked a little bit about it. I'll link
Yep.
for you guys. You're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'll have all the links for you guys there.
Sounds
Anything else? Any other resources you want to point people to at all?
No, I think, especially the book, we didn't get to talk about it, but I'm super excited. It really
You
is.
want to go a quick little thing about the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So Butterfly Goo, The Down and Dirty Truth of Transformation. It is a humorous memoir. Unlike somebody asking me if it was a science book, it's not. It's not butterflies. So it's an analogy of really looking at, we distract ourselves a lot of times with the beautiful, that final piece of transformation, the ta-da, the butterfly emerging from the chrysalis, the cocoon. And it distracts us and undermines our ability to understand the arduous nature of transformation, and that it's not only okay that we struggle, it's necessary. It's part of it. And my goal with this is, well, one, to make you laugh. And I hope you do that because, not to be arrogant, but I think I'm funny. I think I'm hilarious. So using my own path, and again, muck, goo, failings, triumphs, all the things I get to learn along the way. I tongue in cheek, I use Campbell's The Hero's Journey, or in my case, The Heroine's Journey. And for those of you who don't know, Campbell was a philosopher, writer, and he talked about the idea that while all our journeys are different, there are kind of stages that we all go through along the way. And, you could see him in Greek, mythology, Grimm's fairy tales. He consulted on, Star Wars and, when Luke did this and Darth Vader did that, all of that. And what I challenge is that the way he's kind of got this, usually it's represented in this neat little circle, and it's just not. It's messy, and it's painful, and there are people that come along the way and they help you, and there are mentors, and there are all these things. So at the end of the day, if all you want to do is laugh, and especially at me, have a little schadenfreude, that, oh, so glad I'm not you. It's great. Or if there are exercises in the back and there are takeaways, and I'm really clear, look, you get to use this book however you want. If you just want to laugh, great. If you want to examine some of the takeaways, maybe you take away something different, great. If you want to start playing around with the exercises in the playground, and I call it a playground because it's not about forcing transformation. It's just willing to experiment, play around, do as much or as little as you want. It's your journey. So you get to choose. But my goal is to make transformation more understandable, therefore more actionable, and therefore more achievable.
I think you're doing a great job. This has been a fun podcast.
Oh, great.
The one last thing I like to do here on the Social Community Show is I like to do a weekly challenge. I know we've covered a lot of ground. We've gone on kind of different ways. It doesn't have to be something we talked about, but I'd like you to issue a challenge for the people to do this week.
Excellent. I would say, going back to what we talked about noticing and then listening to what we're telling ourselves, just notice this week. Notice where that, whether it's anxiety or it's just that physical kind of something shows up in terms of whatever you want to call it. Stop. Listen. Ask yourself, what's going on? Like, what is this? And just dig in. Sit in the goo that is going to show up and just listen. And from there, you don't have to do anything at this point. That's the challenge. But if you want to, what's the conversation you're having? And if it's not a good conversation, what's the conversation you want to have?
Oh, that is powerful. What's the conversation you want to have? I need to write this down. And then I'm experimenting with this last question here. I want to kind of end the show with. This is the first time I'm doing this, so bear with me. What does becoming legendary mean to you?
Oh, it's funny. The first thing I think about with legendary is the show How I Met Your Mother and Neil Patrick Harris saying legendary. I think it depends on your definition of legend. Legend can be this huge, big thing, that, the world recognizes you and you're having this huge impact like we talk about. Legend can be a story that has been passed down through generations. Sometimes it can be a legend that's here, do this. This is really powerful. It can be a legend of like, oh, don't do this. It's not powerful. Or it's really bad. I would say, what's the legacy you want to leave? When you think about legendary, what's important to you about that? What's important about the impact that you want to leave? And therefore, what's the legacy you want to leave with the world? We're not going to live forever. And maybe, most of what we do will be forgotten. But what's the impact we want to have, the fingerprints that will be there, whether people recognize it or not?
That's a beautiful thing. I like that. Thank you so much. Rachel, this has been an amazing interview. We've gone all kinds of directions. I absolutely love it. I've got an entire page of notes. Thank you so much for sharing all this stuff, having a great conversation. I really, truly appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Tyson. I had so much fun. And I did laugh. I love coming away from a conversation where my cheek hurts. To me, that's like the measure of success.
Perfect. I'm glad we achieved that. What an amazing conversation, Rachel. I got a page full of notes. I hope you guys too. That was fun. Wow, we went through so many topics, so many things. I got some great insights here. That last part with legendary, what is the conversation you want to have? That's on my list. I'm going to contemplate that. I'm going to work through that myself. As you guys know, here in the Social Community Show, there's no paywalls. There's no premium content to subscribe to. We give you everything up front and only ask if you found value from this episode, share it with at least 2 other people. As always, you can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, or your favorite podcast player. For past episodes and links to everything we discuss here today, head over to thesocialcommunion.show. Until next time, keep learning, transforming, and growing on your path to becoming legendary.